the war will end anytime soon. Moscow rejected many offers of coming back to a cooperative security model. Even before February, there were several proposals. There were talks we held at the UN, at NATO Russia Council, but also our Polish chairmanship in January 2022 offered a kind of a special dialogue, Renew European Security Dialogue. It was all rejected at that time. Putin has already taken decision to start this, as he calls, the special operation. Rather should be called a full-scale operation, full-scale war. So Russia is not giving up its goals of depriving Ukraine of sovereignty and full control over Kiev. Of course, they lost the battle of Kiev, they lost the battle of Kharkiv. They need to change a bit the tactics, but the goal is still the same as for now. All this, of course, based on the ideology already mentioned, ideology of Ruski Mir. So there are, I would say, couple, 6, 7 challenges ahead of us. Of course, those so-called referenda in the occupied parts and the partial mobilization are new tactics of Kremlin. It seems that Moscow is desperate to prevent the advances of Ukrainian counteroffensive, and it is a kind of way also to blackmail the West, which is supporting Ukraine. The mobilization announced by Putin is a serious escalation. I wouldn't underestimate it. It's still 300,000 new troops. Of course, they could be bad trained, they could be, the morale could be very low, they could be, as we've seen it on many films and pictures, I don't know, drunk and very not very well prepared. But it's going to be 300,000 troops forced to fight. So I think we should react to this also properly. And of course, we cannot also ignore the Russian threats regarding the use of nuclear weapons. Mr. Putin has been trying to threaten us from the very beginning with this use with nuclear weapons. We should not be threatened, but we should again analyze it properly and be ready to continue our policy. Let's take it really seriously, although there are no direct steps taken by the Russian army with regard to any kind of preparation for such a step. The strategic messaging of the US government and other NATO allies, I would say, is adequate. The fact that Jake Sullivan just recently said that the consequences will be catastrophic for Moscow, it's the right thing to do. What we need to do is to properly address this problem, this challenge. The consequences should be really catastrophic for Russia, and we need to make Mr. Putin to understand what would be the consequences of such a step, crossing the line which was never crossed by anybody after the World War II. So, in a nutshell, we must not allow Mr. Putin, of course, to intimidate us. What we need to do is to keep calm and carry on as you did successfully in the past. The next challenge, of course, is the fact that Russia has taken control of nuclear facilities in the southern and eastern part of Ukraine. For us, as a neighboring country, is a direct threat. As for now, any diplomatic solution for that problem has not been found, but it doesn't mean that we should not keep any kind of possibilities of dialogue. The visit of international agency shows that there is a direct risk with regard to it, and I'm pretty sure that Mr. Putin will be playing on this. He will be trying to again destabilize and force us to change our tactics. So let's take it seriously, but again, let's not be threatened by this. Belarus, which is somehow forgotten topic. We are so much concentrated on Ukraine, on what's going on near Kherson or Kharkiv, but in Belarus there is still authoritarian regime which is very much dependent on politically, and not only politically, on the will from Moscow in terms of military coordination and cooperation. It's basically a part of Russia. I'm pretty sure that the attack which was taken from the Belarusian territory, it was just a decision of Moscow. Basically, Mr. Lukashenko has very limited options with regard to that. But the troops are moving. I mean, there are permanent troops are permanently staying at the territory of Belarus. We should not forget about the Suwalki gap, just hundreds of kilometers between Russia and Belarus. There are a lot of risks with regard to that, especially for our allies, Poland and Lithuania. Of course, Mr. Putin will try to distract us and to create other problems and challenges all around the world. The fact that there were problems with the export of the Ukrainian grain, and Russia has blocked its own export of grain to the North Africa and Middle East. That was a strategy to destabilize this part of the world and to distract the West and to concentrate a bit more on the challenges in this part of the world, which would be quite natural. I don't know, for our Italian or French partners, causing possible migration from North Africa would be quite problematic for us, for all of us, not only for the Western or Southern Europe. We, as a member of the EU, being a partner in the Schengen zone, would be also threatened by such a risk. And the final challenge which I see is, of course, the closer and closer Russia-Iran cooperation. That is Iran, which is providing UAVs to Russia. It is Iran, also isolated by many other, by the Western community, trying to establish even better relations with Russia. We should look into that process carefully. And the role of Russia in the Western Balkans, in the very heart of Europe, in the very center of Europe, would be also, I think, a challenge for the next couple of months and years. The situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina is still very fragile. And now, a couple of comments. What we should, of course, do. What we should do is to, as I said, keep calm and carry on. We should support Ukraine, providing them with political assistance, humanitarian assistance, and economic assistance. But what is the most important is, of course, the equipment which is being and should be being sent to Kiev. I've been, since the outbreak of the war, 7 or 8 times in Kiev. I can tell you that the moods are getting much better than in April, May. So this counter-offensive really put this morale of Ukrainian generals and the political leadership quite high, so they are very much determined and motivated to continue this the counter-offensive. What they need from us is just the support, and of course what we need to think is to start the process of reconstruction. I dare to say that the reconstruction of Ukraine should start now in order to make Ukraine to sustain somehow with this economy. We cannot finance all the time the Ukrainian economy. They need to have their own opportunities. Of course, rebuilding the infrastructure, that could be quite a process, but at least let's start preparing for this process and where the money should be from. I'm pretty sure that it shouldn't be the Polish, British or American taxpayer paying for this only. It should be the Russian government and the Russian oligarchs. We do have money which is frozen in several banks in Western Europe. This money should be used for as a kind of reparations for Ukraine. The funds to reconstruct the infrastructure of this country. Second point, of course, strengthen sanctions on Russia. Poland just proposed another package of sanctions at the level of the EU, and what we are proposing is, of course, to look into the process of the export of the dual-use technologies, all those technologies which are still being sent to Russia, which could be used by the Russian army, and of course decoupling several next banks of Russia from this global system. The third, the further isolation of Russia. Dr. Chifu already talked about this. What we need to do is really to continue this isolation. Any attempts of dialogue now, I think it's too early to start discussions, dialogue, or negotiations with Russia. Russia is not ready really to take it seriously. All those phone calls and attempts to talk to Mr. Putin, I think, brings him to the conclusion that it is the West which is going to be weaker and weaker, especially with the winter, which is just ahead of us. Countering Russian propaganda and disinformation. I must tell you, I've been to many Asian and Latin American countries. My President Duda, was in Africa 2 weeks ago, and there is a lot of disinformation spread by Russia, supported by many other international actors. What we really need to do is to fight it. Then we will need somehow the support also of those partners all around the world. And finally, of course, to fight the Ukraine fatigue. As I said, winter is coming. I can see it in Poland, the prices of energy, fuel, gas, electricity, fertilizers. This is all very problematic. I'm afraid that especially in the western part of our continent, our Western allies, which were somehow encouraged so far by the public opinion to act decisively, not only by the political will of the leaders, mostly because of the pressure, they could take this winter as an explanation why they will not continue this support. So this would be the biggest challenge. So